Probably.
Just goes right on. Are you guys ready?
Yes, we're ready.
You ready? Okay. All right, I'd like to call to order the meeting for the St. Mary's County Board of Education for Wednesday, December 13th, 2017. May I have a motion to move into executive session?
I move the board enter into executive session for the purpose of personnel issues under Maryland Local Government Article Section 9-512A, Number 1, and administrative function items under Maryland General Provisions Article Section 3-104.
Do I have a second?
I second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carried.
Yes.
All right, are we all ready? Okay, I'd like to reconvene the meeting for the St. Mary's County Board of Education for Wednesday, December 13th, 2017, and we will begin with the Pledge of Allegiance.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Let's see. All right, and then I am seeking a motion to temporarily suspend the rules and have the Secretary Treasurer preside for the meeting for the purpose of election of officers.
I move the board temporarily suspend the rules and that Dr. Smith preside over the meeting for the purpose of the election of officers.
Do I have a second?
I second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Dr. Smith, it's all you.
Well, thank you very much. The floor is now open for nominations for the office of Chairman of the Board of Education.
I nominate Karen Bailey as chair.
Ms. Karen Bailey, do you accept the nomination for Chairman?
Yes, I do.
At this point, I would ask all in favor of Ms. Karen Bailey for the office of Chairman signify by raising your hand. And let it show that it is a unanimous vote. Congratulations.
Thank you.
Again. The floor is now open for the nomination for the office of Vice Chairman.
I nominate Kathy Allen for Vice Chair.
Ms. Kathy Allen, do you accept the nomination for Vice Chair?
I do.
May I see all in favor of Kathy Allen for the office of Vice Chair signify by raising your hand? Fantastic. Please let it show. Unanimous. And congratulations to Mrs. Allen. Is there a motion to return to the regular rules with Karen Bailey assuming the responsibilities for Chairman of the Board of Education?
I move we return to regular rules with Mrs. Bailey assuming the duties.
All in favor?
Aye.
We needed a second.
Hmm?
We needed a second on that motion.
Is there a second?
Second.
Okay, I thought it was a second. All right, good. Well, that's, that's why you only let me drive for
I know.
this little
For the little
point of
tiny
time
bit that
once
we
a
do.
year. Anarchy ensues. Congratulations, thank you.
Okay, all right, and with that, now I'm seeking a motion to approve the agenda.
I move approval of the agenda as presented.
Do I have a second?
I second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carried. Okay, board reports.
Well,
Mrs. Weaver.
I have done numerous things throughout the last 2 weeks, a lot of getting ready for the holidays and a lot of great shows. But today I would like to focus on something a little bit different, some wonderful things our students are doing and staff are doing at our schools. First, I would like to talk about Ridge Elementary School. Of course, that's down at my part of the county. They are doing such things as they have adopted 3 families, and the staff and the community are selecting items from, they have something called the Giving Tray, so that they can specifically help certain families with some needed items, or maybe some wanted items or wishful items. They're also working with 2 local churches and the American Legion to identify families to help in the holiday season, and also with the Southern Maryland Food Bank. So they're doing so many other things. Also, the Fair Lead Academy is doing some wonderful things. The staff, of course, always does wonderful things with their students and helping them out. you know, such as snacks and helping, like, say, with needed items of clothing and wash, et cetera. And I have seen it firsthand, you know, like when I've gone down there for a quick visit. The other thing that the students did was a penny drive, or it's called Penny Wars, and the money that they collected from the Penny Wars goes to Mike's Bikes, and if you're from the southern end of the county, you certainly know who Mike is from Mike's Bikes. And he does wonderful things in the community. He is a very giving person. So the money is going towards, for him to help needy families with dinners for the holiday season.
I wanted to mention that last weekend I was up in Lancaster, Pennsylvania. I went to school up there and visited some of my classmates. At Lancaster, we saw a play called The Christmas Story, and it was performed at the Fulton Opera House. And I was told, I didn't realize this, it's the oldest continuous opera house in the United States. It was built in 1852. I did a WikiLeaks on it. Got a little bit of history. It was a very nice venue. Also, recently, just last week, at the Election Park Rotary Club, which I'm a member, we had chorus groups from Leonardtown High School and Riken, and they were wonderful. Very, very interesting Christmas show, and all the members certainly enjoyed their performances. I also attended a ribbon cutting ceremony at the Air Museum at the Naval Base. I'm sure most everybody has probably visited. If you haven't, it's worth seeing. When you walk into the main building, on the right-hand side is a replica of the first Navy aircraft. It was built by, it's called a Curtiss OX-1, and my Experimental Aircraft Association group built that. We flew up to Hammondsport several years ago and essentially did a reverse engineering on the design because the drawings were very limited that we had. It's not a flying model, it's just a replica of the aircraft, and it was donated to the museum last year, and it's one of the highlights, in my opinion, of things to see at the museum. Lastly, my wife and I attended the ESMAC Christmas party put on by Jill, and I wanted to compliment you. That punch that you had was pretty good. I would suggest maybe next year you add a little bit of rum in it, but other than that, it was very good. So,
Okay, I'm going to continue with Mrs. Weaver's theme. There's a lot of community outreach from all of our schools throughout the system, and just to highlight a few up in my neck of the woods in the northern end, Dinard does Shop with a Cop for their students. They have a lot of family-based programs. They've partnered with Walden Sierra to begin a program to assist students with family members that are either incarcerated or battling drug or substance abuse addiction. They have in-school therapy for the students at Dinard that help the guardians transport them to and from appointments, things like that. Letty Marshall Dent also has Shop with a Cop. I think on the first Friday in December, they had their annual gingerbread auction, and they raised a little bit of over $1,500, and that went out to Sending Smiles, Children's Hospital, and then also to the Foundation for Heroes, the superheroes that go around and visit children. They also, the staff at Letty Dent also adopted families. They provide support to their several students that have lost parents during the course of the school year, so they hand out large Christmas stockings for them. They also adopted 4 families that the staff is providing wish lists for. Let's see, at Banneker, they have a huge coat drive there every year, and they also have set up a giving tree Chopticon, I'm sure anyone has seen the singers throughout the county. You know, those students are singing their hearts out like everywhere for the last 3 weeks, and they're wonderful. The National Honor Society is sponsoring children in the community in order to make sure that they have a good holiday season. Coat drives. White Marsh has adopted families. They have a kindness project where they do a different project each quarter. It's the 5th grade class. This quarter, this December, I think they're donating to a nursing home and goodie bags. Margaret Brent, the 8th graders, just finished their service learning project where they collected donations, whether it be toiletry items, clothing items, or they started a musical therapy program up at the Veterans Home. So they collected iTunes cards or money for donations and old used iPods that they could use for the residents there. So I will put a plug in. If anyone does have an old iPod and you know you have them lying around in your drawer, right, that you don't use anymore because now everyone has their music on their phone, ship it up to the Veterans Home or get it to Margaret Brent so they can send it in because they are in need of those iPod devices. And it's just there's a lot of give backs. We do receive a lot from the community. I know Kelly Hall's up here during the summer with the summer programs and all of the help that we receive, but all of the schools are giving back at the same time to help in just in different ways. So thank you. Mrs.
Thank
Washington?
you. Even though this is the busy season with people preparing for holiday celebration and time with family and friends, the school system is still busy educating our students and putting on programs. Chopticon High School had the Magical Dinner, which they do annually, which was a huge support. There was Friday, Saturday, and Sunday events. It was a wonderful presentation, and the students did a fabulous job. Leonardtown High School had the National Honor Society induction. Over 60 students were inducted. Congratulations to the students and the educators who helped to get them there. And thanks to Brooke Fallon, the sponsor of the program. Also, Green Holly Elementary School had a multicultural day. They had 26 multicultural stations that the students could visit. They could sample food, they could see clothing, listen to music, learn about the topography and the geography and the history of the particular countries. It was a very enlightening experience to learn about people from all over the world. And in addition to that, our students are always giving throughout the year, but especially this time of the season. Our students don't want to see any child without or any family without, whatever it may be, clothing, food, with something under the Christmas tree for those who believe. For example, George Washington Carver Elementary School annual Helping Hands event, 14 families were chosen to shop with a personal shopper, staff members or volunteer, for new presents for the children. And the school wrapped the presents, and the families were able to shop from the donated items and take as many items as they could. And at 12 o'clock, they opened it up to the community to shop for donated items, and they had 14 families who came for that. In addition to that, it's so many schools here who give back. Greenview Knolls Elementary School adopting Christmas families with staff donations. A lot of our schools do that, and this is just a small sample of what our students do. Lexington Park Elementary School, Operation Merry Panda Christmas Box. And at the holiday, they provide support for families with food and gifts for their children. And they also participate in the snack program where students take home food. And also I was there visiting last year, and there was a mother, a single parent, head of household, and she had 2 shopping carts filled with food from their food pantry. And she was able to take home and feed her children. And not only that, toiletries and personal items for her children. And that was heartwarming to see. And they opened the door, and it was new items. It was like a store. Food, clothing, whatever a family needed. And if it was used, it was in excellent condition. So I thank all our schools for providing for our students and making sure no student in this county is hungry or without something at Christmas. Leonardtown High School identified families within their community who they could support over the holiday. The guidance department made contact with those families, offering holiday support. Various groups within school offered to sponsor the families. Toys for Tots, baseball players went to Piney Point Elementary School once per month to help support students in reading buddies. The Key Club is making cards to distribute to nursing home. Cooking for a Cause, a group started by 2 10th grade students that have cooked items for children of families coming to pick up items at the soup kitchen in Lexington Park. So that's just a sample, but all of our schools do something, and they do it throughout the year, but especially during the holiday season. And I thank all the schools, the students, the parents, and the community to dig in their pockets and make sure not only that their family have, but to give to families who are less fortunate. So this is a community that gives, and I'm glad to be a part of this community and our school system where we foster giving and character education in action. Thank you.
I'm going to round this out by sharing something that's going on very specifically by one of our teachers. It, as you've heard, is by no means the only thing that's going on, but this is somebody I've known for a very long time, and I wanted to highlight what she's doing. About 7 years ago, Bonnie Bevins, who is a wonderful teacher at Spring Ridge Middle School, noticed that kids during the winter were coming to sporting events or going to other things, and they didn't have anything warm to wear. And so she started a hoodie drive. This is now her 7th annual hoodie drive. Last year, they gave out over 300 items to youth in St. Mary's County just before winter break. And so she is asking for new fleece pullovers or hooded sweatshirts, brand new youth extra large to adult sizes for both boys and girls. And she needs to have the items by December 18th. If you're interested in giving a donation, whether it be the item itself or a cash or gift card donation, you can make checks out to Spring Ridge Middle School and just put in the memo line that it's for the hoodie drive. And she's aiming to have all of this by December 18th so that students can go home for winter break having something warm to wear. And she said that she still sees students today out in the community wearing the hoodies and fleece pullovers that she has donated that she's given to them over the last number of years. So it's one person showing that one person can do something amazing, and it just snowballs. No pun intended.
Yeah.
But just an amazing school system that cares as deeply about the community as the community cares about the school system. And I think we just want to thank everybody for all that they're doing. So thanks very much.
That's, I thank you, Mrs. Allen. I don't think I could have said it any better. So one of the things I did ask earlier this week from the schools, just because we were kind of on a theme. We had the Student Leadership Advisory Committee meet with me last week, and we had a really great session. We followed up with meetings out in the school, and we were talking about kindness, and we're talking about empathy, and we're talking about how to combat negative messages with positive. How do you drive out darkness? Light. So light a candle, don't curse darkness, that kind of a thing. So it really, the last thing that we ask from the schools on Monday is just send us a couple of things that are going on in your school that really kind of focus and is that, that lighting, that wonderful thing. Within a matter of an hour, we got 6 pages of things that are going on at our schools, that our staff are directly engaging with our students, and the students are engaging, coming to them on their own. I mean, it really is quite a wonderful system, and it is exactly that. We care for the community, and the community cares for schools, and we want to make sure that message is really loudly heard by all. When we met with the students, we talked about the SLAC students, and I'm taking Roma's presentation because she is, oh my gosh, taking tests. So let's all think of Roma.
3 AP tests.
Give her warm wishes and encourage. She's going to do. I know she'll do very, very well. She's a gifted and dedicated learner. One of the things we focused on was how we spread kindness, how we message to others, how we let other people know that we care about them. And the students, at the end of the day, they were all given cards, and they were to write cards of compassion, cards of caring, cards to their friends, and then carry back some cards and distribute blank cards to others so that they could also share that message. It ties with what we did with administrators the week before. My gift to them was the gift of work. It's the gift of work. Every single supervisor or a principal got 100 blank cards. Just 100 blank cards. There's no great message. It has the logo on the front. It comes in a little file folder. And my charge to them, my challenge to them was, when we come back, they could start immediately, but certainly when we come back in January, we're going to have about 110 days left between now and the end of the school year. If they can write a positive note to somebody, focus on something that went really well, to write a little, not an email, because we do write emails and they can be very supportive, and that can be, we send text messages, shorter and shorter with more and more images. But what keeps us are small little notes. I know it's been very important to me throughout my life. The little notes that people will write to me, I keep. So we're asking the 85 people in attendance. We gave them 100 cards and asked them to try to write a positive note to somebody, at least one a day. And you run out of cards by the end of the year. And if you run out of cards, we'll print you more. But the way we've got that math worked out, and Dr. Jaffers back there can check me, we're talking about 8,500 hand-felt notes going out to staff and perhaps even students. Now, given that we only employ a little over 2,000 people, that means that people could receive multiple notes before the end of the school year, and really make a difference. And we really think that does matter. We had, as one of in working with our children, we're talking about the power of a 30-second video posted to social media, how that can sway a decision or an opinion. Somebody who perhaps has never stepped foot in a public school or hasn't been there in 30, 40 years can make a decision based on what they might see in a small video. And so how can we can't stamp out all the other videos that might be out there, but how could we put videos out on the other side? Now I know you all are tweeters, and we all are shooting videos, and we have a Twitter feed that's got thousands upon thousands of positive messages and positive images, and all our kids doing wonderful things. But we wanted to charge the children, because they seem to be they're creators of some of that internet content. So how could they create positive messages? And so the last thing that they were given was iPads, a little bit of free time, and to come up with some positive videos that kind of emphasize empathy and kindness and giving. And Dr. Marr took them all together and kind of stitched them together. And so if you'll indulge me, this is a little 1-minute thing that we posted to Twitter. Thank you, Dr. Moore, for kind of stitching that all together,
That was
but
good.
recognize that those, so,
Very
sure, those kids were given like, what?
45 minutes.
45 minutes to put it together, and they, they know the power of an image. They understand social media better than we ever will. And what I like most is that at the end of it, the one gentleman, you'll see Khalil, everything should end with the offer of a cookie. So it's like be kind, empathize. No, it ends with the offer of a cookie. And so may we all have cookies, and may we all share them freely. It really is a special time. It's a special school system, and you've got really, really wonderful kids and really, really wonderful adults working with those kids. And just thank you very much.
Okay. Any public comment? No. Okay. All right, then we will move right into our consent agenda. Do I have a motion to approve the consent agenda?
I move approval of the consent agenda as presented.
Do I have a second?
I second.
All those in favor? Aye. Opposed? Motion carried. And we will go directly now to Dr. Jaffer with Performance Matters Renewal.
Good morning, Dr. Jaffer.
Good morning. Good morning again. Scott, I haven't received my card from you yet, so I'm waiting for that.
So for the record, I was gonna, and I have it all queued up, ready to go, depending upon how this presentation goes. If it goes really well, I'm gonna be like, you are wonderful, and if it doesn't go well, it'll be just supportive, empathizing. So we'll just have to see.
I haven't received one yet, so this morning, I'd like to talk about Performance Matters and Unify for the renewal. Since its inception in 2005, 2006, it's sort of expanded its focus and its pervasiveness on three specific fronts. It's still utilized as a data warehouse, but now we are talking more about the second and third bullets. We also use this now more as a repository of items, as well as a tool for assessment creation at the local schoolhouse, PLC level. Thirdly, we also utilize it now more, and that's what our focus will be this year in our department, is a recordation of intervention data, whether it be behavioral and or academic. Again, 2005 and 2006, it's been in our county. We've utilized this to provide an objective performance level for all of our data analyses for local, state, and national assessments. Its primary function is to use assessment data to drive the instruction. As I've said, the functionality has increased over the last couple of years. We are now focused on online assessments, or what we use the acronym OLA, or answer key only tests, AKO, and we're hoping to build that capacity more locally. So we don't all in central office want to build tests. Working with Jill and Heesmick, we don't. Our focus is not to create more tests centrally. We want PLCs to create those tests at the schoolhouse locally, so that they have more on-the-ground data that they can use actionably. So we also want to use the intervention data as well. I know Ms. Long's coming in this afternoon, or at least after me, to talk about the MTSS platform, and we're working with her office and Susie Fowler's office to talk about the academic and or behavioral interventions that Unify can support. And again, we are moving towards more of a 360-degree view of student data, as opposed to just a one-size academic viewpoint of a student. Again, we use data for instructional support and planning. We use the data for assessment, review, revision, and instruction. And we use data never punitively, but we use data for target setting, student growth, looking at disaggregated student groups, and using the data to set reasonable targets for administrator and teacher effectiveness. As we continue down this path of Performance Matters, we want to work more towards formative and summative assessments. As we use this data repository by building more items that PLCs, as I've said, and teachers can use more actionably in their classrooms, not waiting till centrally, we give these assessments, but they can do this almost as much as they want to, even on a daily basis. Again, this is a repository that houses archived data in one landing page. And again, it's much more visual. I've attached a few slides that you can see. It's a lot more visual, and sort of the data trends stick out more, as opposed to just sort of remotely looking at, a vanilla page of archived data. And we use this intervention data. It's all in one platform, so it's a one-size-fits-all. When we go to an IEP meeting, we ask our whole teams to go to a particular page in Performance Matters so they can bring up all the data, whether it be attendance data, whether it be academic data, and or intervention data, all in one page, so that all stakeholders can see the data sort of on one sheet. So again, we talk about data to inform instruction. We use this, our math memo, and our curriculum maps to drive some of the instruction. You see the numbers and the quantitative ends. It's very important that while we talk about centrally wanting to reduce the number of tests, at the same time, we have got to have a sort of a dipstick and a benchmark of how all of our kids are doing consistently at any one time in the year on a particular test or tests, so that we get an idea going into our big park testing or HSA testing where our students are standing. So, and again, these are just sort of visual cues for our teachers, for our principals, for administrators to sort of extract relevant data for us to make good, actionable decisions in our classroom. I could definitely talk more about this at any one particular time. And again, you could see the ones that I've highlighted. That's an example of where we can see just on a moment, just a quick visual that we can see that particular standard up there would need some remediation and/or intervention. And again, we ask all of our teachers to be able to access their students' data. Not all teachers have to create tests. Not all teachers have to create an intervention, but certainly we are asking teachers, and we're expecting teachers to be professional to access their students' data if it actually resides in the Performance Matters platform. So just a couple more screenshots for you to see, and we can see distractors in the upper left-hand corner. You can see A, B, C, D, and E, and you can see the green certainly is the correct answer. But also sometimes we glean, as instructors, we glean more information from wrong answers or incorrect responses than we do from right answers and correct responses. And we want to build that assessment literacy, not just in central office, but also across the school system at large. So, as we close out here, we're talking about some alternative measures for Performance Matters, maybe using things differently when we can get down to the targeted achievement gaps for disaggregated subgroups and student groups such as economically disadvantaged students. This is a really nice tool for us with a quick snapshot of where our students are standing comparatively. We also want to use data always in context. We want to look at data in context across the system and also in our classroom. We use what we call leading data, which is data that we take throughout the school year to drive our instruction, but at the same time, we always juxtapose that with our lagging data, which is data from last year and the years past, so we get a good snapshot of where we had been and where we're going, and we sort of synergize leading and lagging data to make good instructional decisions. So, again, we can break this down in a myriad of ways, and our teachers are very creative with how they're interpreting some of the data platforms that we have. Some people think about this more from a standard-based or standard level, and we can see how students in context perform on a particular standard, with a disaggregated group like students with disabilities, vice the aggregate. And again, looking at that juxtaposition gives us an idea of where our gaps reside and gives a more focal and focused tool for intervention. So one of the things that I've used in the past is looking at and allowing and helping our teachers set reasonable targets for growth. And we talk about ability groups, and research states that at any one time we have 9 different ability groups in our classroom. And again, the introductory, developing, and advanced, those are 3 larger groups. So within each of those groups, we have 3 subgroups. So it's If you have 3 subgroups, you have 3 groups within those 3 groups, so you have 9 actual ability groups, and it gets hard getting down to the nitty-gritty, but what Performance Matters does is allow us a little bit more interface with all the data all the way down to the standard level if we choose to do that. We've also created in our office, we've taken what had existed, and we're using this to sort of inform our teachers. Some people like to learn professional development turnkey 24/7. Maybe at home they want to take a look at how they access some of the unified data. Maybe they don't want to ask at the schoolhouse, but I've placed that up there so you can see what kind of documents that we're uploading and things like that. So I don't know if it's going to open or not, but
Well, the PDF that you shared opens here, so
Okay.
and the
Yeah,
link,
we
the
got
link
it.
is there.
so I shouldn't be touching the equipment. So talk
Take
about
it-
some
take
more
it as
about
read.
that. I can't seem to get to the next slide.
And now you're out of, so I'm gonna have to include this in your card, Dr. Jaffers, because Dr. Morris stepped out of the room, leaving you untethered without a
I
lifeline.
know
Thankfully,
Dave Howard's probably. I
Mr.
knew.
Howard-
Up there it says Dave Harris.
He phoned a friend.
Yeah.
Let's see, that's, I'm trying to remember the panel here. When did Pete?
Into that space, I will say about this, the new Google sites. They're a fantastic way to convey information. They're very simple to set up. They're very consistent in their navigation. And a gentleman that's working with Mr. Jaffers, a former teacher, Mr. Gibson, kind of put this all together, that particular page. And you can tell that it's a great blending of an educator's mind with somebody who's extremely interested and passionate about technology and assessment, and they're really blended together. If you can visit the site, you can navigate through. It's very logically laid out, and there's a great deal of information, and you can see the mind of a teacher in working through all of that. I was laughing a little bit when Dr. Jaffers was talking about his agile ability groups, that there are 3 groups, and in 3 groups there are 3 groups within the 3 groups, so there are really 9 groups. And so whenever we start to think we understand what Dr. Jaffers is talking about with students, we get into the deeper dive. There's always a deeper dive. And honestly, back of us, there's probably 3 more groups within the 3 that are within the 3, so that actually gives us 27. So it does go back to all of that. The goal this year with Performance Matters is to move a great deal of control from central office to decentralize. The platform has become very useful in a decentralized way. So a content supervisor can say, this is a really good question. And this particular question gets to this standard really effectively. And here's all the information about this one question and all the distractors, and this is a good question. And it used to be that the content supervisor would say, this is a good question, and I shall keep this good question, and I will only take this question out when I want to assess it, and then I will take it back, and nobody can ever see that question because I want to use it for my tests. What Unify is doing and Performance Matters is doing is saying, that's great, create that, and then share it with everybody. And let anybody access it whenever they want to use it in their classroom. And all the data that you gather from that test, regardless of what school you're in or what teacher or what classroom, let us get that data back so we can then see on a whole how everybody's doing on that particular item. It's a really simple concept, but it has taken us almost a decade to get the tool there, and now we're really working with people to unlock the power of that.
Yeah, just to piggyback on that, Jeff Gibson has done a great job of creating this site, and our whole department, Kristen Marr, myself,
Yeah.
have populated, but he's been the architect of this site, so.
Team.
I would ask that the Board of Ed approve this item agenda as presented.
Mrs. Weaver, you have a question?
Yes, this Performance Matters, does the company use this information to improve their program?
Yes, they're always, and that's part of the frustration. We're going through an iteration on December 22nd, in fact, and so they constantly take all the, we have a Maryland users group. They've gotten so large, they're actually expanding to Texas, Maryland, Pennsylvania, and we give them a lot of feedback. So there's a lot of back and forth, and we ask them to do X, Y, and Z, and most of the time they respond to those to those upgrades, and they, in the form of iterations and changes to the platform. So it takes us a few weeks to get back and get familiar to what they've done, but they're very responsive to what we've asked them to sort of upgrade and to improve. So,
Okay.
yes.
So you've asked for certain upgrades or certain things as a group. What about as individual schools? Do you have input as to what you would like to see and be able to get that response back from the company?
Yeah, that's, heretofore, we've been, all questions and answers from the schools have gone to our office, and we've interfaced and interacted with the company directly. Most of the time, if one school asks, every school has asked for a certain function or functionality upgrade to the platform. So we found that if anything that makes sense, if we can't do it already in the existing platform, we would ask that they would upgrade. And most of the time, anything that the schools have asked for, we've tried to accommodate to give back to them the data that they've asked for, whether it be in the Performance Matters data or some other venue.
Okay, so I guess I didn't mean like, but you answered my question, like individual schools, like say Ridge Elementary and Spring Ridge. I guess I kind of meant like as a school system versus you going together with Pennsylvania's school
Oh, yes.
districts
Yes.
and the Texas, to go as a group to ask for change versus St. Mary's asking for certain items to be changed. But you said they're receptive to that?
Absolutely, that's a very good point. Their platform looks a lot different than in Pennsylvania, Maryland. Those two platforms look much different. So they basically have the same functionality, but what we've asked for, we seem to be far ahead than Florida and Texas and these other states. So our what we do is a model for what they do. They're about 5 to 7 years behind us when it comes to data analysis. So yeah, you're absolutely right. Our platform is high tech, most advanced that they offer, and those other school systems and states seem to be sort of in our wake, if you will. So.
Okay, great. Well, thank you.
They're in our way.
Dr. Jeffers, I'm concerned about, not concerned, but just curious about the security
Yes.
of the system. Who gets this and who doesn't get this
Yeah,
information?
that's a very interesting and very important question. We have the ability in central office, in our office, to decide who gets the latitude and access and who doesn't, and we always go through the principal. So we ask the principal, how much access do you want teacher X or counselor Y to have? And basically, we have defined user groups in central office. So if a teacher, they always get access to their own students. But if a particular, let's say, team or grade level team wants to do something creative and unique at their schoolhouse, they ask, hey, Alex, can we do this? I said, well, have you talked to your principal? Why? And they say, well, yes, we have. And then we would go and configure differently the access points for that team. So yes, we have user-created defined groups. But if the principal allows, as long as the principal greenlights this, then we definitely give them access to their students.
I'm very impressed with the data compilation
Thank you.
that you have. And I recall years ago, I did a study on mine safety, and all we had is raw data. And we codified about, a couple thousand, what I would call intervening variables. And when we crunched it through the computer, we found about 90% of our suppositions were supported by the data, but about 10% wasn't.
Interesting.
And it was earth-shattering. What we found out, cause and effect on very specific esoteric things that minors do that cause serious fatal accidents. So you got a minefield, if you will, of data. Now my question is it's really generic, but you got all of this great data.
Yeah.
Do you have any measurement on the improvement of our teaching process based on the intervention that you're doing?
Well, yeah, I think Scott alluded to this. 50% of this is actually creating a good test. The other 50% is using the data actionably and effectively. We'd like to think, there hasn't been any extensive studies, but we'd like to think that the data that exists informs teachers to more actively and effectively impact their instruction. I'd say the best teachers intuitively know where their students stand at the end of each class, right? You know, in the classroom, that was one of my mantras. I had to know where every one of my 30 kids or 25 kids or 35 kids stood at any one time. And what this does is, but I never had it archived, if you will. It was all in my head, and I had my little scribble notes here. But this is now archived indefinitely. We have data that actually goes back 3 years. So we have 3 years of archived data to find out all this rich data on the student. So if I have a 7th grader in my classroom, I can go back down to their 4th grade and 5th grade years to see how they've performed with our local assessments in St. Mary's, in addition to how they've performed on the national, normed assessments like Park. So yes, I would say anecdotally speaking, we have a lot of really good data that supports that. Nothing hardcore quantitatively though.
Right. Well, I want to compliment you. I'm kind of a metrics person myself. And it's one thing to have this really valuable data, but then, of course, how to interpret it, how to use it. I think you've got a great program.
Thank you. And intuitively, I would think that because our scores put us in the top quartile, in the top 5 of the state for Park, I believe that we are moving in that trajectory. I do feel like there is enough actionable, quantifiable data to say, yeah, what we're doing locally here with using this Performance Matters piece assists. Don't know if it's the actual cause, but it's one of the, with our great teachers with the great archive data, really get us the bang for our buck, if you will. So,
Thank you.
I had the same question that Mr. Davis did about security. I think it's a great tool for the teachers, especially at the elementary level where you have such a wide span of student learning and abilities in a classroom. So hats off to continuing with it.
Thank you.
So, Mrs. Washington?
Thank you. This program has been around about 10 years, and I remember when we didn't have it. So we have come out of the darkness into the light, as the superintendent alluded to earlier about dark and light. And it is a wonderful technology to assess student individual learning, the teacher effectiveness in the classroom, and it's centralized and it's individualized to the student, to the test, question, and it is a very reliable tool. So it is, and you keep making it better. So thank you very much.
Thank you.
We've come a long way since Mark Murphy and Becky Loker
Yes.
plotted out
Yeah.
every single student at Carver Elementary as an Excel spreadsheet. And shortly after that, statewide, we started talking about data warehouses. We've been really fortunate with Performance Matters because we got in really at about the ground floor with them, and they really have, I think, been responsive to what we have needed. And the ability for teachers to really look at each individual student, their metrics, and use that data to determine where they needed to perhaps go back and reteach a concept or reconsider whether or not a test item was effective, I think has helped teachers immensely so that they are making best use of their time in working smarter, not harder. So this is something that I'm really pleased the system has continued to use and has continued to work to make changes in it that work for us that have also helped others across the state. So thank you very much.
Okay. All right, with that, may I have a motion for this action item, please?
I move that the Board of Education approve the purchase of the Performance Matters software license for a 1-year contract term, 09/01/2017 through 08/31/2018, in the amount of $110,000.
Do I have a second?
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carried. Thank you very much.
So Dr. Jeffers, I'll be writing you a thank you note saying you did a really nice job. I'll have to get a good quote, though. I'll have to give me a little bit of time to say just the right words.
Oh, dear. All right.
Although he left his Unify Resources window open, and so it has to close out because, poor Mr. Brooks, there you go. Thank you. That'll be like PS. Close your windows.
Floor type care and cleaning products. It's a tongue twister for me today.
Good morning, board
Good
members.
Good
Morning.
Mr. Vine.
May I get this up for you here?
Oh, nope, he's good.
Nope, got it.
Okay. Success. Thank you for the time this morning. As you know, the Department of Operations is tasked with the responsibility of providing a clean and healthy environment for all of our students and employees to learn and work in. In order to best do that, we do a lot of research and purchase equipment and products that we think will give us the best chance to do that in the most efficient way. Ms. Mayo and I are here to talk to you about a couple of those products and our desire to continue procuring those to help us do our job. As you recall, in July of 16, we brought before you for approval a contract containing a large variety of cleaning supplies. That was a one-year contract with 4 additional year options. A few vendors on that contract opted not to renew that option, so we're here to talk to you about a couple of those products. And in looking around, a former contract that we used to use for these products for Anne Arundel County expired, so we decided together with procurement to bid out these contracts for the best pricing that we could find. We did so in November, posted an invitation to bid, received bids on these items. Items 1 through 5, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 on the bid are products that are part of our Spectra cleaning system. There's a unit attached to the wall on every custodial closet in the entire school district called a Spectra system unit, where these specific products from Daycon are housed, and they are dispensed in the correct concentration that our employees need for the receptacles that they're using. This helps us. Not only are they extremely good products that we field tested and feel very comfortable with, but it helps us avoid spillage and overuse, and it allows us to be very fiscally responsible in that regard. Items 6, 7, and 8 are part of a floor care system that we started using 5 or 6 years ago, designed to allow us to do the bare minimum of stripping and waxing floors from an efficiency standpoint as well as an indoor air quality standpoint. We've had great success with this system. It allows our building service staff to maintain floors without constant stripping and waxing throughout the school year. And it saves time and allows us to get to a lot of other things in the building. So we're very comfortable and confident and have used these 8 items from these vendors. The bid offered rewards, as you see there. This contract, if approved, will be valid through next December 31st, with renewal options for 4 additional years. And I'm happy to entertain any questions that you may have about this request.
Mrs. Weaver.
It's not really questions, more comments.
Okay.
Ms. Bailey, you know that from the beginning, from day one I sat here, I have, really been on, not just you, but your department, to make sure that you are fiscally responsible with how you are spending the taxpayers and the school system's money. And the procurement process, there's some others, maybe outside the school system, that don't understand how the procurement process really works. And sometimes they believe that putting out a bid, it's like an all or nothing. Here is one example that you have really done a wonderful job making sure that the system has gotten the best bang for their buck, not just going out as one big lump sum, that one company is going to get all or nothing, that you've split it up to make sure that our procurement process, that we have been fiscally responsible. And thank you so much for doing this. This is just one example of how our school system really makes sure that we are spending taxpayer dollars wisely.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Mr. Davis?
Yes, I just kind of embellish on what Mrs. Weaver was mentioning. on the two products here, items 1 through 5, I assume in items 6 through 8 are completely separate. So Daycon products, were they the only ones that bid on those items 1 through 5? Am I understanding that correctly?
I did receive 3 other bids, which were rejected because they did not provide product samples, and that was one of the requirements of the bid. Because the Daycon and the products 1 through 8, they were all the standard products that we use. And when we solicit bids for products, we specify a standard, and we accept or approve to equal. But in order to determine if it's an approved to equal, we required samples. And so the 3 bidders who responded without providing samples, their bids were rejected.
Rejected, okay. So there wasn't, the ones that were accepted, whatever their price was, that's what you had to
Yes,
accept?
yes.
Okay, thank you, that's all.
Well, no, you had Daycon products and Rutherford, and between the two,
Right.
Daycon had the
Right.
better
They both submitted
overall
for all
price
8
for the
items.
first 5, and Rutherford had the better price for the remaining 3.
So she split
Yeah,
bid
the other
between
the other 3 were
one and
non-responsive because they didn't include.
Yes.
So you did, and that's why you split between the two, Daycon and Rutherford. That's in the attachment.
Right. I do think
bid
that
tab is
there
there.
were a couple of items that were less from one bidder than the other,
Mhm.
but because they work together as a system, we are recommending award for the items as presented, 1 through 5 and
Okay.
6 through 8.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, I don't have any questions, thank you, great job. I mean, I echo Mrs. Wheeler's comments, so, thank you.
Thank you for being effective and efficient with our resources and having products that our employees will not have to do it as many times. For example, the flooring, and I think that's good because, you know, trying to add more FTEs has always been a challenge for the board, even though we want to do it. But to work with the products that you use can be helpful to save the time and energy of our employees. Thank you.
So,
All you have to do is walk in one of our schools and see how clean, especially the floors, are, and it doesn't matter when through the year you're in. It's always quite noticeable. So I appreciate your putting the bid out, taking the time to do this, and bringing it forward in this way. Thank you.
all right, may I have a motion for this recommended action item?
I move that the Board of Education of St. Mary's County approve the contract award of ITB number SMCPS-2018-0 FCCP to Daycon Products Company and to Rutherford Supply to purchase floor care and cleaning products on an as-needed basis and as funding permits. The estimated cost for these products is $165,000 per fiscal year throughout the duration of the contract, which can be valid through December 31st, 2022.
Do I have a second?
Second?
All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
All right, Mr. Hartwig.
I'm trying there.
HVAC at Hollywood Elementary School.
One of the longest titles ever for a PowerPoint presentation.
I wasn't gonna read it, I'll just summarize. HVAC Hollywood, go.
And Park Hall.
Right, and Park Hall, yes, sorry.
Good morning, board
There's the
members.
title.
There it is.
Here we are.
Read along.
You almost had to go on to a second
I know.
page.
Use the smaller font.
One of the most critical decisions we make collectively in the life of a project is the selection of the architectural and engineering team. So today, we're gonna make a recommendation on awards for 2 projects. So just by way of background, the current CIP includes funding for systemic renovations of the HVAC systems and roof replacement at both Hollywood Elementary School and Park Hall Elementary School. These are 2 separate projects. Funding is allocated over multiple fiscal years, 18, 19, and 20, and that will be a big factor, that cash flow will be a big factor in the way that we plan our phasing. Given that cash flow, we're looking at doing a small portion of the construction work this summer of 2018, but the majority of the work will occur in the spring of starting in the spring of 2019 through the summer of 2020. It was our desire to have an architectural firm serve as the prime consultant for these projects. We have done other projects where the mechanical has been the prime, but in our experience, especially when there's multifaceted aspects of the project, the architectural firm is has greater expertise and skills in handling multiple design consultants. And I've also found over the years that in terms of construction administration, architectural firms tend to have greater experience and greater expertise. I mentioned before that phasing will be a critical component of this project. Both Hollywood and Park Hall are fully occupied. There's not much room for relocatables. So, and we know that construction, renovations, and occupied buildings is one of the greatest challenges in K-12 construction. So the scope of both projects are very similar. So starting with Hollywood Elementary School, as well as Park Hall, will be the complete replacement of the heating and cooling systems, including the digital controls that operate those systems. It will be the replacement of the roofs. These projects, we've intentionally combined the systemic HVAC with the roof project so that we can have better coordination with the placement of roof equipment. And at the end of the job, we have a watertight building. So at Hollywood, we have a combination of steep slope roofs and we have low slope roofs. Our desire is to replace the steep slope roof with a metal standing seam roof. It was a 40-year warranty. And then replace the single membrane roof at Hollywood with a built-up asphalt roof. There will be some electrical upgrades, replacement of the emergency generator, and then we'll be looking at a variety of low voltage systems such as the fire alarm system, security system, data, and the PA system. So in total, the design construction budget is $5.5 million. So Park Hall really mirrors the scope of Hollywood, but it has a few differences. The roofing at Park Hall is all low slope, so we'll be going with an asphalt built-up roof there. The great unknown about Park Hall is that the original section of the building has a gypsum deck. And we found out from our experience at Piney Point, we need to be very diligent in our initial field assessment on the condition of that gypsum deck, because it's going to have a huge impact on the cost of the roof. Portions of the fire sprinkler system at Park Hall appear to have galvanized piping, so we'll be replacing the galvanized piping. And then an added element at Park Hall Elementary School is modifications and upgrade to the existing sanitary lift station. So the design budget for Park Hall is a little bit larger at $5.8 million. So the procurement of A&E services is a quality-based process. So, and in that process, the Department of Design and Construction maintains a ongoing file of pre-qualified A&E firms, and specifically those firms that we feel are qualified for systemic renovations. And there were 7 firms in that category. We reviewed the technical qualifications of those 7 and arrived at a short list of 3 firms for oral interviews. Those oral interviews were conducted between November 13th and 14th. And through that process, we ranked the firms, and there were 2 firms that really had unanimous superior rankings. And as our process, we then entered fee negotiations with those 2 firms. So Our selection for Park Hall Elementary School is a firm well known to you, is Wheeler Goodman Massick, WGM. You can see from this slide, they've done 17 projects over the years for us. The major projects have been Leonardtown Elementary School, Leonardtown Middle School, and most recently Spring Ridge Middle School. On all three of those projects, they worked with Jeff Albin, who at that time was with Geib Engineering, but has since developed his own firm, Albin Engineering. And WGM, in addition to working with us, has done a lot of work for Anne Arundel County Public Schools. Are currently doing a modernization of an elementary school there, also utilizing Albin Engineering. I think one of the great strengths of WGM is in their construction administration. They've done a tremendous job for us. So, and in the systemic renovation, that's where the project can fall apart right before your eyes, is in the construction administration. So that was a high priority for us. And also, and I'll come to this later, the second firm is not a firm you may be familiar with through the experience at St. Mary's County Public Schools, but it's JWWO. And they have done over 30 projects in the last 5 years through the public school construction program. And this slide, along with the projects that Jeff Albin has done, represents over 275 K through 12 projects. So extensive experience. We've got strong recommendation from a number of school systems. GWWO is currently the architect for Northern High School in Calvert, and has done a tremendous job getting that project on track. Both firms during the interviews displayed thorough knowledge and expertise in phasing plan, and that was also a high criteria for us. So we did enter negotiations for proposed fees. The services that are proposed in those fees involve all phases of design, from schematics through construction document bidding, construction administration, and then post-construction task. Our experience is that fees, A&E fees in total for systemic renovation generally have run 8%
Click
to
the button
9.
to download and get
Sorry.
That's going on his card.
I'm not getting a good card. Come on.
We'll make it
You're on the
supportive.
naughty card now.
I did download an image.
I'm sorry, Mr. Hartwood, go ahead.
Sorry.
So our experience has been those fees will range from 8% to 9.5% of the construction budget. We actually allocated 10% to that category. And so then you see that both firms are very close in those percentages. Was a slightly larger project and some added task. Wheeler Goodman is at $504,773, which is 8.7% of the construction budget. GWWO Architects is $476,837, which is 8.67% of the construction budget. Again, both under the 10% that we allocated for that line item. We are also asking you for a small design contingency for both projects of $30,000. When you get into the systemics, you might find that you need a specialized consultant that we didn't anticipate originally. So we want to have a small contingency for that. And also there's a possibility of more site visits during the construction administration. So that's part of our recommendation. We really believe we've brought forward two very strong A&E teams. We have the advantage of having one MEP designer, so there's going to be a level of consistency between the two projects. But we also get the advantage of having two architectural firms kind of analyze those systems and give us recommendations on the best values. It also provides us with two separate cost consultants. budgets are always a challenge on these projects, and having two cost consultants with similar projects allow us to really analyze similarities and differences and have questions about that as we go through the design phase. So that's our recommendation.
Mrs. Weaver?
No questions. Thank you for all the information that you provided in the background and everything.
Mr. Harwood, I concur with you about hiring an architect. At first glance, you're looking at HVAC, well, let's just hire a HVAC contractor, but as you said, there's so much more in the system that an architect can design, air balancing, heat transfer, so on and so forth. So I applaud you for hiring, in this case, the A&E. When I first looked at this, I wasn't sure, but you explained it very well. A couple little things, the standing seam roof that you're proposing, what's on there now? What roof are you using?
They're asphalt shingles,
Okay.
and that's been a problem. That was a cost consideration in the original construction.
Right. And the substrate, it would not be an issue?
It won't be. I mean, we'll look at that. It's a plywood substrate, and typically with these standing seams, you'll put in light gauge structural framing to put it together.
Right. I just thought maybe there might be an added cost. Have you done any analysis on cost per ton? I've done that a lot, you know, when you're looking at the kind of a parametric estimate. You know, am I spending $2,800 per ton, or is there any metrics that you have that gives you a comfort level on that you're getting the best value for the investment you're putting in on the HVAC system?
Yeah, we really do depend on the cost consultants and our experience. I can't tell you exactly what that dollar figure is per ton, but again, I think that's the advantage of having two cost consultants do this, and it will certainly be a consideration of which systems we put in. At Greenview Knolls, for instance, we put in a system because of physical limitations there that reduced the duct size and just had duct sizes for the outside air requirement. So that saved us a lot of tonnage there.
Right. Okay, fees. It appears that between 8.5, 9.5, that's consistent with what I've seen in terms. Now, are these proposed fees from the A&Es, or are these what you negotiated?
These were negotiated.
Okay, so I'm assuming you beat them down pretty good, right?
We spent a lot of time on the phone going through these
Okay.
to arrive at what I thought was an equitable and fair fee.
Okay, I have nothing else. Thank you very much.
It was very thorough. I think everything is very well thought out. Obviously, we will defer to Mr. Davis on his construction background on a lot of this. But, you know, once again, thorough and well thought out, and in the end, as I'm sure we will see with the next action item, it's always a cost-saving measure also. So, thank you.
Making the right choice.
Mrs. Washington?
I agree that when it is a multifaceted project, which includes the HVAC, the generator, the roof, you do need a single architectural firm to coordinate everything. And both companies have a wide array of experience, both locally and statewide, and their fees are very close. So you did a great job. Thank you.
Thank you. I just want to add one other advantage that I didn't mention in my presentation. Inevitably, when you get into these systemics, HVAC projects, you're affecting the architectural finishes. And so you've got to repair those, you've got to repaint them. And so having an architect at the prime really allows you to think about an inexpensive way to refresh and rejuvenate some of those architectural finishes.
Thank
Another
you.
advantage.
I think everyone's made the points my only addition would be clearly from the local CIP program that we're going to talk about here in two more presentations. What you've negotiated falls within the bounds of what we have for this particular project, and falls actually, at least on one of them, quite short of what we have. So I appreciate the effective and efficient approach to this. Thank you.
I have one question to add. Is there any emphasis at all on hiring local? I know there's not too many A&E firms in the county, but everything being equal, which may be very hard to do, I'm a strong proponent of trying to keep our local contractors, in the loop, so to speak.
Two things. I think this project will likely go to a general contractor. But then within that, there would be an opportunity for local subcontractors. We kind of approach it with our local firm to really establish the relationship. They know us, they know how we work. We will give them the courtesy call that we're looking to put a project out on the street. And then, being local, they have some advantages. And we've been fortunate that, like the electrical firm that we have used on many projects, the HVAC firm on most of our projects have been local. You can't guarantee them. You can't, with a competitive bid, we can't stipulate. Yeah.
Right. Thank you.
May I have a motion for this recommended action item?
I move that the Board of Education approve the design award to GWWO Architects in the amount of $476,837 for the systemic HVAC renovation and roof replacement at Hollywood Elementary School, and approve the design award to Wheeler Goodman Massick in the amount of $504,773 for the systemic HVAC renovation and roof replacement at Park Hall Elementary School. Furthermore, the Board of Education approves a design contingency of $30,000 for each project.
Do I have a second?
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carried. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Hartwick. Just trying to look up what GWWO stood for, and they don't have the.
You got their,
so-
you got their marketing.
It turns out there's a click and it downloads an image, and so my apologies, Mr. Hartwick. If you can find out what GWWO stands for, I just wondered what.
I haven't.
Oh.
I'm prepared for that, but I don't want to.
Oh, okay. Yes, all right.
A mile long.
Yes, all right.
All right,
Ms. Howe,
Ms.
good morning.
Just trying to get it. Okay, hold on. Sorry, the wrong button to start off with. Sorry about that. So good morning. I'm here for two projects, or two agenda items that really link to what we do in DSS, and it's kind of fitting that I follow right behind Mr. Hartwick because of the collaboration of what we do. This time of year, we are in the budget season for the local CIP, and we're asked by the county commissioners to look at our budget amendments that we can bring forward for projects that are closed out. Mr. Hartwick has done a very good job of managing the money that the county and the state provide us for school construction, and as we look to the projects that we've reviewed right now, we have 3 projects that are substantially complete and ready to be reverted to the county commissioners. The first project is Duke Elementary School, $191,001. Esperanza Middle School soil erosion, $11,489. And the tennis court resurfacing of $135,863. The total of those 3 projects is $338,353. So the projects are complete. The funding is not necessary any longer, so we could revert it back to the county commissioner's FY 2018 reserve. In addition to this, I did want to note yesterday the county commissioners took action on 2 projects that they deferred, which we'll talk a little bit more about in the local CIP presentation, but they reverted money on the new elementary school, $50,000, and then a little over $1 million on the DSS project, and Based on our approval of that project, they will be when this comes forward, they will be adding the remaining $367,000. So they took that action on their side. If approved today, this would go over to the county commissioners for their potential action. So we're looking for approval to revert the funding for unused funds.
I have some questions. So this money that you are reverting back to the county commissioners will be used for an upcoming project for our DSS?
No.
No?
This project will, the funds from these projects will revert to the FIN 2018 project list that they have. That's where all of the county agencies put their funding. They can utilize it for a variety of different resources. One of the discussion points that they had yesterday was the advancement of FDR Boulevard. So our money goes in with all of the other county agencies' funds to create one large pot of reserve capital money for the county.
Okay, so I have some other questions. So on December 5th, I attended the county commissioner meeting along with you and Ms. Bailey and Mr. Smith and several other people. So, and approximately 1 hour and 14 minutes into the YouTube video, there was some questions brought up, or some comments. So my question is, it was proposed by one of the commissioners that the funds that we have, remaining, such as this, to be put into a, I guess you would, I don't exactly remember how they phrased it, but basically like a bank account, like a savings, to save the money ourselves for the projects that we need. Now, that being said, is there any policy regulation on the school system side or on the county commissioner side that prohibits this, or is there any state or federal law on the books that states that the money must revert back to this pot that you were talking about?
Right. There is regulations that say that any funds that are not used from the capital program must be reverted at the end of the project to the county commissioners to their reserve. We could, and we have in the past, gone back and then asked to use some of those funds. If we have a bid that comes in and we've done everything we can, we valued, engineered, we've looked at the scope, and if we need additional funds, we can go back and ask for those funds. But at the completion of our projects, there are regulations on the county side that say the funds have to be reverted back to them for capital.
And is that a, did you say that's a state?
I'd have to double check the actual COMAR, but see if it's COMAR or if it's county, but there is a regulation in place that we've been under the pretenses of using since I've been in the school system.
Okay,
But
and
I
that's
can
how
double
I've
check
always
what-
seen it. I didn't know if they were thinking about changing how they operated, that this was like the first talk of it. It'd be very interesting to find out, since this is what they are one of the county commissioners has proposed for us to do with the funds. It would be nice to see what they have in mind, instead of us just reverting this money back like we have been fiscally responsible every year. And I also want to point out that, with these funds that you have now, you would say like leftover that are a little bit actually savings. Sorry, savings. I couldn't think of the word. That not lumping all bids when you put them out into one project. As I showed earlier with Ms. Maley, where she has actually awarded the contract to several different vendors, that it really works out in savings. So, but it would be nice to find out what the county commissioners have in mind as far as a quote savings account that they had proposed for us to start putting money into so that we can turn around and use for our own capital improvement projects.
And much of the funds, Mr. Hartwick and I do a really good job, Mr. Wooden's involved. We really try and look at our budgets. We look at our historical costs for components. What this usually comes down to is we do have a contingency on our projects for those unknowns. And typically at the end of this project, much like these, what we're talking about is reverting the contingency on the project. It's not that we didn't award a portion of a contract, but we do have contingency that is usually left over at the end of the project.
Thank you very much.
And I will check on the actual regulation that requires us to return it back.
That
and
would
I'll
be
report that
nice,
back
because
out
that would be
to the
nice for everyone to be on the same page with that.
I have no questions.
I don't have any questions on this, because we talked about it after the meeting. I just, since Mrs. Weaver did bring up the county commissioner meeting, I would just like to compliment both you and Mr. Hartwick for your presentation, and your responses to the commissioner's questions. I know you guys were filling in Dr. Walker's absence, and they performed admirably, so, it was very well done, so, thank you. Mrs. Washington?
No questions, thank you.
To Mrs. Weaver's point, I wonder if the fact that, for instance, on the Captain Walter Francis Duke project, that $191,000 that will revert back are from the proceeds of general obligation bonds. I
Yes.
wonder if that perhaps
does.
may have an impact on our ability to utilize those funds for us to make a decision, or the commissioners to make a decision for us to have a set aside and use those. I don't know how that
Right, it's
works on their end of things.
Twofold, it's also the impact fees, because impact fees can only go towards capacity projects. So it's a variety of different resources that have to then be put back to the right place.
Very good. Thank you very much.
Okay. May I have a motion for this recommended action item?
I move that the Board of Education approve the transfer of $338,000 and $338,353 from the 3 identified local capital improvements program projects to the Commissioners of St. Mary's County FIN 18 Reserve Capital Improvement Projects account.
No tongue twister.
Yeah,
Do I have a second?
it happens.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carried. Thank you. All right, and now we will just move right into the 19 to 24 local capital improvements program. It's the dry year.
While you're loading that, Ms. Howe, I would like to also echo Ms. Bailey's. You did a very competent and complete job in presenting, as you always do. And the largest part, and this falls to us, we are in the business of education. The way all of these projects get funded and where the funding comes and how it gets phased and what can be used for this and what can be used for that, it is a dizzying list of rules that you and Mr. Hartwick have to navigate, working very closely with the county commissioners and Jeanette Cudmore. It is not something so simple as you get a loan and you start the work.
Right.
So I just would like to say thank you.
Thank you very
And
much.
thank you, Larry, as well. So let's talk about capital.
Yes, let's talk about the capital plan. So we are actively in our local CIP budget cycle. It started last month and will continue all the way through the end of this school year. To go back over a little bit of highlights, we talked a lot about this when we talked about the state CIP, but it is relevant to continuing changes that are continuing to occur and will continue to evolve over the course of this session. There was a lot of talk about the state share. It does remain at 58%. That decision was made. However, we had been recommended for 57%, and we're slated for further discussion on this in FY 2020. So I think we need to be preparing ourselves as we look forward to our cash flow at the state and the county level, that the state share will be reduced in future fiscal years. If not next year, it is probably on the foreseeable future that it will be coming.
And each LEA has a different calculated state share. It's not the same.
Yes, it's based on our wealth and the ability to put forward projects in the CIP. So there's a discussion about those calculations and how it's going to go, but at the end of the day, we are a growing community, so that will factor into it. The cost share this year increased by 3.2%. Given the market and some of the things that are happening, I continue to see that as a continued growth, so cost is going to continue to go up. For us, what that means is the building only cost less site development went to $302 a square foot this year, and the construction cost with site development went to $360, and I continue to see that going up as well. As we continue to hear, and it's a lot of talk in Annapolis and Baltimore about these topics, there will be continued ongoing discussions about a facility condition index, and that will play out in a slide that I have to show some of the early on implications of what that has created in terms of the state need. There will also be ongoing discussions in the state participation of systemic renovations, and that's a key piece for us because much of what we have coming forward is going to be the renovation of those projects that we built in the 1990s. So it's a key discussion. We need to keep watching what is happening. And then, of course, the results of the Maryland 21st Century School Facilities Commission, which is looking at different forms of construction and how we should operate. So we are trying to stay on top of all of that. The State Capital Improvements Program needs to be a big discussion of how we get to the local CIP. The first round allocation notice that the IAC issued was $156,800,000. It's anticipated that the second round, they'll authorize additional $53 million from the appeal we just went to the IAC. And ultimately that at the end, the Board of Public Works will allocate an additional $70 million, which gets us to a state allocation this year of a proposed $280 million. We talked about that facility condition index, and a lot of school systems prior to, including us, looked at all of our projects, and what transpired this year was a statewide request of a little over $700 million in state request, leaving a shortfall of $421 roughly million. That has kind of dictated how we're moving forward. The requests clearly exceed what the state has to be able to participate. So on our appeal, Park Hall Elementary School was recommended for the $2.3 million that we're looking for the FY19 funding. As Mr. Hartwig said, it's a 3-year process for this, so we did not have to appeal that project. When Dr. Smith and I and Mary Hayden from my office went, we did appeal for Hollywood Elementary School for an additional $1.2 million, or $1 million, which would get us to the $2.2 million that we need for that project, which would fully fund our request and allow Mr. Hartwig to continue on with the construction. We then had to take a really good hard look at that shortfall at the state level, and we had 2 projects that did not have any recommendation at that time, which was Green Holly's partial roof at $859,000 and the Great Mills High School partial roof at $1.5 million. The concern we had was that we proceeded on to appeal both, we would get a small portion of the funding for those and not be able to proceed forward with construction. So what made the decision was to appeal for the $859,000 so that we could try and fully fund Green Holly. And to defer by 1 year the Great Mills partial roof. Mr. Whidden and I conferred, and it is okay for us to do that, so that is what our appeal was to defer Great Mills High School for 1 year and trying to seek full funding for Green Holly. We should know in the next week whether we were successful for that or not.
And we will still have one more chance after that, though.
The Board of Public Works,
We still have
yes.
one more chance to go back and present our case.
Yes, we're very hopeful that we will receive a large portion of that funding for that project in this second round. So how does that translate to our FY19 requests? And those are the only projects that I listed here, which total $7.7 million of local county funding. Park Hall and Hollywood, as we said, are fully funded at the state level, so we're looking for the county's portion of those projects to keep them moving forward. Green Holly is $1.1 million for the county share of that as well. Then you'll notice we below that have Green Holly's switchgear and their HVAC. We're asking for $125,000. This is local funding. It's the same for Diner underneath at $265,000. It's for Mr. Hartwig and I to do some preliminary work with engineers to look at the facilities, to make sure that we're going in so that our budget when we get to 2020 is locked in. I think Piney Point was a good example of why we need to do the work up front. But what this really allows us to do is to think about some of the systems to make sure that the system we're going to put in, we have the really good budget for it when we go into 2020 and ask for those construction projects. I think it will benefit us very much in the long run, because once you lock in on a budget, there is no more additional state funding, so we want to make sure that we get those budgets completed as early as possible and solidified to the point we know that we can move forward with the projects. The qualified zone and academy bond in the aging school, I did put money in. This is the local matching share for design because the state does not participate in any design funding. We're assuming in 19 that those projects, those programs will remain, but if they don't, then we would be removing them. In FY17, the aging school program was not funded by the state, but we're proceeding on as if they would. For the relocatables, we are currently analyzing our enrollment projections, and we'll be looking to see where we do need to place relocatables. Predominantly, we're going to be looking at our middle school and our high schools to make sure that they have adequate seats based on the growth we're seeing at the middle school and high school. The building infrastructure critical and programmatic. The first time we asked for these projects was last year. We were successful in getting them, and they're really going to address a lot of the issues that Mr. Whidden has in his comprehensive maintenance plan. This year we did add 2 in FY19 and FY20 under the building infrastructure critical. We're looking at our high school auditorium audio-visual. We already have the project approved to do the lighting. This would complete that loop and provide all of the audio and visual that is required for a modern day auditorium. So we will address those. And in 2020, we are looking at the Leonardtown High School stadium lights
All
and
three high schools?
sound at all 3 schools.
Yeah, I'm sorry to interrupt, the high school AV, that's all 3 high schools?
That is all 3 high
Okay,
schools.
all right.
Yes,
Sorry,
we
just
have-
before I forget.
We have the lighting for all 3 high schools currently. Mr. Hartwick is working on the construction documents for those.
Mhm.
And this would address the audio and the visual.
Okay, thank you.
One of the things we talked about in that is the visual has gone to the way they project onto the walls to do performances and to do presentations has drastically changed since those buildings were installed.
Okay.
And then the stadium lights is Leonardtown High School stadium lights and sound at all 3 stadiums. And we were able to do that, we were able to add those because at the end of last fiscal year, we were able to take a couple of projects from Great Mills and complete those with year-end funding, so they were removed from this list. These 2 projects really are going to make a difference in how our school systems are maintained for the future. If we roll this up to the 2020, the changes that you're going to see is that the new elementary school was deferred 1 year by the county commissioners. This reflects that change. Given where we are, we're going to continue to monitor enrollment at the elementary school level, have continued discussions about state-rated capacity with the state, and we'll reevaluate the placement of this project as we get to the educational facilities master plan when we have additional demographic data. The Great Mills High School partial roof was deferred to 2020 as well by the commission, by our decision not to appeal. In 2021, we have Mechanicsville, Letty Marshall Dent, and a secondary capacity option study to look at the future of where we need to be. No new projects were added in 2022 because of cash flow for the other projects that were already underway. In 2023, we have the second portion of the Great Mills High School roof. We've divided those up to 2 projects based on the life expectancy that we have in those roofs. And then the final project, which we'll continue to monitor based on enrollment and need, is the secondary facility for the middle school and the high school. We will probably make some changes to these as we move forward in the educational facilities master plan of where everything needs to be slotted. The important thing to note is with the increase of the 3.2%, and the changes that we needed to make to some of the projects based on the increased cost, we came in at $7.7 million for our FY19 requests, which is $168,000 less than where we were for our recommended amount for FY19 as of last year. Moving the elementary school out does create almost an $8 million deduct in FY20. Overall, given all we've done over the 5 years, we're up a little over $2 million. But based on a 3.2% increase, it's a reasonable amount. We've made the adjustments. One of the things we will have to be very careful, and we'll talk about it as we move forward, is when we get to FY 2021 and 2022, those are large amounts. So we'll have to work closely with the county to figure out how we can stagger the projects to make them financially work, knowing that there will be cost increases along the way. So what we're asking for is approval of the FY19 through 2024 CIP to be presented to the commissioners in January. The one piece of this is you do have detail sheets that are currently on board docs for you to review. We met with county staff yesterday to take a training. They're going to be modifying that format. It's going to go to 1 page. And it will be done online. We're working through some technical difficulties between their IT department and RT so that we can get on their server to work on it. But it will be an online submission, 1 page, more condensed, and streamlined so that the community and officials have more access to those data sheets on a regular basis because they will be on the county's website. So as that process continues and we get our sheets uploaded for the first work session in January, we will provide you with a copy of those as well.
But the content won't be significant.
The content
This
is
still the same,
streamlined,
yeah.
so the data in the background will be there and visible if you want to look at it, but it will just really become down to a picture, a change from the prior fiscal year, the project description, and then the funding and the funding sources. They've streamlined it.
Thank you so much for looking forward, the thinking forward, so that our schools are maintained in top shape and we get projects done that, you know, in a timely manner.
Can I just make one point, Jim, before you go on? Before, just so everyone's clear, the movement of the elementary school by 1 year, we had already all discussed that with
Yes.
the county commissioners. It wasn't like they just decided yesterday, oh, we're gonna push it. So, there have been ongoing discussions with that based on our enrollment,
Yes.
probably for the last 6 to 12 months
Right.
almost, so.
Right, and that is something that happens. We evaluate it now, and we'll evaluate it again when we do the master plan. And we've always said projects are fluid. They will need to move in or they will
Right.
need to move out reactive to what we're seeing is in terms of demographic trends.
Right, right. I just don't want anyone to assume that they're like, oh,
Yes.
you have to move it. That was not the case. All right, I'm sorry, Mr. Davis, go ahead.
Mr. Hall, the cost that you mentioned, $302 per square foot, is that a county average or is that state average?
That is a state average, and they have had in years past, because it's based on the projects that they have that they know are out to bid. So they're analyzing that, and then they're analyzing data trends that they're hearing from the construction industry. One of the discussions we've had is that we have to be very careful when we design our projects, because a cost for someone in Montgomery County or in the central portion of
Sure.
Hartford, they're going to get a better savings than we are, because as Mr. Hartwig said earlier, we don't have a lot of the architects here, we don't have a lot of the major contractors, so that they do have to have a higher cost when they come in to stage here. So it is a state average. They analyze it every time. If something happens and they open up a couple of bids and they see that there is a need to increase that, they have, in the middle of a budget cycle, increase that cost to address it, because what they want to do is they want projects to be viable as well.
I assume this is present value dollars, correct?
That one was calculated, that price was calculated in July, and no real large projects have come in that have altered that decision to go with that figure at this point.
You mentioned in 2020, you have the contingency for a new school, and then I think you said dependent on the demographics. Could you embellish a little bit on what you meant by that? I think I know what you mean.
Right,
but-
so this year we're looking at our enrollment projections at the elementary school level.
Right.
And we are all in concurrence that the project can move out based on our enrollment at the elementary school level this year. I think we'll have to continue to monitor to see if that trend continues, that we're going to reach a point where we've kind of plateaued at elementary, or we're gonna continue to grow. The other piece to that we have to look at is how those cash flows, there will be a sweet spot that this project will fit in with all of the systemics in alignment with the demographics.
Right.
So that is what we're gonna have to keep collaborating on. We're looking at the birth rate. The birth rate has been climbing, so we wanna see how that's really gonna translate to students coming in through our kindergarten and first grade program.
Of course, Dr. Smith, I think, recently mentioned that we've kind of leveled off. In fact, it's actually gone down by 80 students or something this year.
Yeah, so the enrollment trends this year, when we take a look at it, specifically in kindergarten, we are under the projection that we have, and we're at a bit of a quandary as to why, given that live births are up. So we believe that the children are in the county, they're just not necessarily enrolled in public school. And while that may hold for this year, who knows what the year after that and the year after there and the year after that. We project enrollment based on all the information that we have, but at the end of it, there's a concrete reality of head counting of how many children are in the building and where they are. And this year, when we did our absolute end of the, head count, we had increased enrollment in middle and high and decreased enrollment in elementary, and where we saw the most dramatic decrease was in kindergarten enrollment. And that's the one thing that we, once they're in kindergarten, we kind of can progress them through, but walking into kindergarten, we base that on what we see in our pre-K Head Start and demographic information that comes to us from the hospital.
Which really indicates how important it is to make those projections. How many people are in the pipeline? Because we're talking about enormous amounts of money that we're going to invest, asking the taxpayers to make these investments. So it's obviously very critical that
And
we
much
take a
like-
look at that demographics. as you
Much
said.
like Mr. Jaffer's presentation, we delve into the data. So one of the things that we're looking at is we're looking at the rise of 4th to 5th grade and 5th to 6th grade and 7th to 8th and 8th to 9th. And as we mentioned, high school and middle school are up. And when you look at it, the cohorts that are rising, and we actually broke it down into their subgroups of the schools that feed into those middle schools, the increase we got did not come necessarily from our elementary schools rising up. They were new students to our middle school and high school. And for us, that's a change in our demographics. So it's happened over the last 2 years. We've seen it. So the question is, will it continue? Where did it come from? So that's the information that we're delving into, is where did our students come from that were not already in our system that came to middle and high school this year?
My only question is, with the movement of the elementary school, do we envision any other projects being pushed out just because that chunk of money is now gonna be 1 year farther out?
So that is what we'll do, and that's what I was kind of alluding to. We start talking about 18 to 14 million. That is a larger amount than the commissioners are used to funding. They're
Right.
usually in the $8 million range. When we go to the Educational Facilities Master Plan, we'll have an additional set of data we'll have the state's perspective on the enrollment. We can look at it, if we need to, Mr. Wooden and I will have discussions about systemic renovations and how those are slotted, and does something need to move to the right or to the left to accommodate that. But we will try and smooth this out a little as we get to the Educational Facilities Master Plan. And that's constant. That is a constant change that we have to make based on increased cost, changes that may arise at a school that elevate a systemic faster than we thought. But it is something we will continue to try and balance.
Because you know I'm looking at Mechanicsville Elementary School because that poor thing has been on here for forever, and it just keeps getting pushed and pushed, so.
There will come a point in time, though, when its systemics are due as well, so that may change the dynamic
Right.
of that project
Right, I
in the
understand.
future.
Okay, all right, thank you, Mrs. Washington.
Thank you for everything you're doing to keep the projects balanced. So it's not one year where we're asking the commissioners for a tremendous amount of money. So we're trying to keep it balanced, something within their reach that they can fund. Thank you.
I'm just going to touch on two things that you mentioned in one of your slides, but to go into a little deeper detail. The 21st Century School Facilities Commission, more commonly known as the KNOT Commission. We hear a lot about the Kerwin Commission and them looking at school funding, but much less has been heard about the KNOT Commission. That's going to have a significant impact potentially on what kinds of schools we build, when we build them, how we build them, and that's something that I'm trying to keep everyone abreast of as I get information from MABE about that, but just please keep that in the back of your mind. And the other one that's really of greater concern, I think, to us, and maybe something that we want to discuss whether or not we want to have a conversation with members of our local delegation on this, and that is the fact that the gentleman who came in to take over the public school construction program envisions that to change from what is now a grant program, in essence, us going and saying, here's what we need, and them just determining what dollars will come to us from the state, instead would turn to a facilities management program. And this gentleman has proposed this facilities condition index that Mrs. Howe mentioned in the slide. And in that, he envisions having independent auditors come in and evaluate every single public school building in the state, and then assigning them an index number based on a variety of factors that is still in motion. And then those facilities that would rise to the top will be the only ones funded by state dollars. And that would put us potentially, as well as other school systems, in the position of being penalized for maintaining our buildings and doing these systemic renovations. And that would mean that our dollars would potentially go to other places 100%. And I know that the governor's office has asked Mr. Gorel to kind of hold off on this, but I don't think it's fair to the students of this school system or the taxpayers of this community to necessarily make such a wholesale change to the way that we fund capital projects. We're very fortunate because we're one of the few states that does give state dollars for capital programs. And I do think that this is a conversation we need to have with our delegation. I think they need, from our perspective, to understand the impact that this proposed change would have on our ability to fund our schools for capital projects, for a variety of capital projects. And you can see this is, there's a lot of thought and research that goes into looking at what we need, when we need it, and how to do this in as equitable a way that our commissioners can fund and the state can reasonably fund. And I believe that's a system that is fair across the state. So
There's been a lot of discussion amongst my peers about this, because for us, we're talking about another 5 to 7 million annually that the commissioners would have to fund to keep us moving forward with the projects that we have. When we get to the point of an elementary school, and definitely when we start having the discussion about a secondary school, it could be crippling to not only us, to other counties in this situation, because our capacity needs are not gonna probably meet the needs of others. So it's been a lot of ongoing discussion and a lot of concern about what's happening. The $770 million request this year, I think, is a definite reaction to a facility cost index of people starting to identify greater what their needs are.
Right. So, I understand, you know, the proposal, this just has not gotten a lot of conversation, certainly locally. There is a lot going on at the state level, but I think it's something that we need to make sure that we stay on top of. And I will do my part in sharing the information that comes forward through MABE, but please keep that foremost in your mind for a bit, because I think it's going to take some action on our part. Thank you. That's all I wanted to say.
Do I have a motion?
I move that the Board of Education approve the FY 2019, FY 2024 Local Capital Improvements Program for submission to the Commissioners of St. Mary's County as presented by staff.
Do I have a second?
I second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Thank you very much.
Ms. Sauer, look forward to presenting that to the commissioners in January.
Yes.
And then coming back and presenting it to you.
It is long.
By presenting it at the state. I have to do all the averaging
Tallying.
and then have that available for the survey of Dr. Jaffers.
Very drying.
I know. Okay, we are back.
Hey, look, it's Cheryl Long.
Hi, it's me. It's the presentation, right there.
I know, that's what I'm saying.
Good morning. You know, I am going to take us back to the board reports for just a moment, and I want to, I jotted down a couple notes of some of the things that were said. And what I heard was caring and kindness amongst our schools and in our community. I heard empathy and kindness, and we talked about the 100 Days of Heart, positive notes. In all of that, those are just some of the pieces that we talk about when we talk about a multi-tiered system of support. A multi-tiered system of support, I'm going to call it MTSS because it is a tongue twister, is a framework. And it's a framework that has multiple tiers, 3 tiers that focus on instruction and intervention, and also evidence-based practices. Teams get together to make decisions based on data that they have. And also a part of this is professional development and, of course, collaboration between school and home, because we certainly want our parents and our guardians to know the social emotional learning and the instruction that's happening in our schools, so they can support both the work that's happening in the schools and continue it at home as well. That framework may sound familiar to you because currently we have about 13 schools that practice in that framework known as PBIS, Positive Behavior Interventions and Supports. So when we talk about MTSS, it's that same exact framework. It has those same components. We believe in that as a system, and what we're doing now is we are bringing that district-wide to all of our schools. So here you see the district-wide implementation plan for the next 3 years, where this year we're focusing on Tier 1 implementation district-wide. That includes schools developing a system, a behavior matrix, expectations matrix for their entire school, and to implement MTSS data teams. Year 2, we're going to continue to refine those Tier 1 interventions and then have professional development and implement Tier 2. And Year 3, then we're going to bring on some professional development for Tier 3 implementation. And I'm going to talk specifically about those tiers to give you more information there. When we look at this year, the goals for our district for this year, like I said, we are implementing in all of our schools the MTSS PBIS framework. Even our PBIS schools are in different places right now. So over the summer, we had our schools participate in training, and it was specifically geared to implementation of Tier 1 and developing those behavior expectations school-wide. It also focused on the importance of data teams and what those look like. We continue our professional development throughout the school year with quarterly team leader meetings. We have team leaders for MTSS and PBIS in all of our schools, so they get the quarterly professional development.
Cheryl, not to interrupt, but you're one slide behind.
Oh, I'm sorry. Yep.
There you go.
Yep.
Okay.
And along with that, we had some professional development in writing action plans. And action plans are schools looking at what they're currently doing and setting goals for where they want to be. And classroom practices are very important because as part of this framework, you know, there needs to be direct instruction in social emotional skills and strategies. So those classroom practices are very important to continue. And at the end of this current year, we want to measure our progress in all of our schools. Schools will be using a tool called Tiered Fidelity Inventory, and that walks them through all the components of a Tier 1 program. And so they will really score themselves and then use that information to revise, you know, to assess their current action plan and revise it for the following school year. When we talk about the tiers, you heard me talk about Tier 1, 2, and 3, and this visual I actually took from our student handbook. So when we think about what does it look like in our schools, at the beginning, this year in our school handbook, we put it in there, so information for our families as well, and it shows the 3 tiers of intervention. And we are focused on Tier 1 this year, which really, it's universal Tier 1 practices, right? We are teaching, providing direct instruction to students on all those behaviors, the behavior expectations that we expect throughout our school, the social emotional pieces, to all students. And research shows that about 80 to 85% of students progress just with those instruction overall in the classroom. But then Tier 2 looks at students, maybe 10% or less than 10% of students that really aren't responding or maybe successful just with those Tier 1 practices. So then we look a little bit further for other interventions that we put in place for students that need a little bit more, and that can be in the form of groups or individual too. And then Tier 3 speaks to those students that participate in Tier 1 as part of that classroom, the school-wide interventions in instruction. They get Tier 2, but maybe have not been as successful with that. So Tier 3 really speaks to individualizing interventions for students, such as behavior intervention plans or things that really happen one-on-one with individual students. So our focus this year, like I said, is Tier 1. Those are some of the pieces you see there for all students: social emotional learning, positive supports, and different practices that we're doing in the schools under Tier 1. I'm giving you another look inside our schools. I've highlighted just a few schools here today. We have Chopticon with their school-wide expectation matrix that they shared with us. And you see the expectations as you look down that left column. It's Chopticon Pride, and each letter in Pride stands for an expectation that they have for all of their students. So they developed their matrix that looks like this. We see what each of those letters looks like in Chopticon, and then at arrival, dismissal, in the hallway, in the bathroom, and during lunch. So they are taking that school-wide expectation matrix and specifically identifying what it looks like for students in each different area. So everybody's clear on the expectations, they're consistent. This is from Margaret Brent Middle School, Panther Paws they have used, and they have developed different posters that you see, a poster for the hallway, one for the cafeteria, one for the classroom, and under each letter of Paws, they have identified expectations for students. What productive, accountable, with integrity, and support me looks like in each of these different areas. And you know, I want to highlight one thing with Margaret Brent Middle School, what they have done. If you look under support me, notice that it talks about the expectations from the teachers and the staff. So they are taking one step further in not only saying, what are the expectations that we are looking for from students, but students, here's what you can expect from staff as well. Here's how we are going to support you. And then the last one is from an elementary school, Greenview Knowles, starting with, it just shows you how, this tier 1 is for every single student. And this is an example of a 4-year-old class in Greenview Knowles Elementary School, where they are using conscious discipline as their social emotional learning curriculum and teaching the importance of kindness. And, and just for us, it begins and continues through every level in our schools. And just, I want to make the connection, how important this is really, this initiative that we have, because it is a direct correlation to the academics. If students are comfortable in their schools, if they, if they're not sure, or maybe they come with us with some challenges, we work in our classrooms and with our staff to help them learn skills and strategies that they need. And so they are comfortable and confident, so when it comes to academic time, we see success.
Recently, Ms. Allen and I know that Ms. Washington was there too, learning about Lexington Park's elementary school's responsive classroom, and it was wonderful. Now, not all schools are doing this, is that correct? But they would have a form of positive, the positive behavior versus the responsive classroom?
You're exactly right. So it looks different in some schools. There's a cohort of schools that are doing responsive classroom, and there are some that are doing conscious discipline, some restorative practices. So all of those are within that tier 1, that tier 1 level of instruction, on teaching those social emotional skills. But absolutely. So they're meeting, even in conscious discipline, the schools that are doing that, they have there's elements of that same practice in these different programs.
And so this year, each school is expected to have, just like the examples you showed, a school matrix, and you're saying that they've already had to have developed this?
They did. We met during the summer, and then in August, when we brought all the administrative staff back, I did a presentation with the expectations for the district on exactly what I'm showing you here. And they then went back to their schools and worked with their teams, and initially started with their school teams, but then, in conversations that I've heard and, visiting schools, I know Dr. Smith and I visited Leonardtown Middle School and heard their process for developing those school-wide expectations and how they brought in the students and got input from the students when they developed those expectations. So that it's not coming just from the administrators, to the students. Really, the whole, the staff and the student body is involved in this process, because there has to be that ownership.
And I think you have parents as well.
Parents
I know
as
with
well.
Margaret Brent, they have the PTA, and they have different, groups that are, so they, like at Margaret Brent, they have an MTSS meeting, I think, once a month.
Right.
And they have the principal, they have students, they have, parents, and they have staff and faculty.
Okay.
So it's really all encompassing.
You're exactly right. Thank you. You're exactly right. Yeah.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Well, I'm very impressed with the data. When I was in business school a long, long time ago, the emphasis for executives was quantitative analysis, decision-making, using Minimax, linear programming. And it kind of went out of vogue, if you will, in the following decades. There's a lot more to making decisions than just raw data. So this is not a criticism, but I was looking at your matrix, and I applaud you for, you covered everything. You get down to bathroom etiquette. I'm just wondering if I'm a high school student, and it's not a criticism, I'm just saying, if I'm a high school student and I'm in my 10th or 11th grade, do I need to be told how to behave in the bathroom?
Yes.
And I must add, it's almost like a helicopter parent,
Yeah.
There's so many rules and regulations, and I don't mean this to be a criticism, 'cause I think you're doing a wonderful job. But I'm putting myself in the seat of the student. And it's almost like, you know, I'm hearing all this stuff coming at me, all this data, all of these rules and regulations. I'm wondering if maybe they tune a lot of this out. I don't know. Do you have any data on?
Yeah,
on
that's a good point that you bring up. So the posters are out and around in the hallways, and you're right, you know, research shows there's like maybe 85% of the students, you know, you talk about your school-wide expectations and they have it, and they move on about their day and there's not a problem. But for those students that maybe have a hiccup here or there, and they think, oh, maybe the behavior in the bathroom wasn't so great today, and the administrator caught them, and then, you know, they call their attention to these school-wide expectations. You know, so it's really, it gives us the opportunity to interact with students in a positive, proactive way, in teaching them, right? So really, this is the foundation for being proactive with students, especially when there's some discipline or behavior challenges. So you're gonna bring them back to that teaching. So, you know, if you think about it in that premise, you know, instead of we're shouting rules at them, they're there and they're visible, but really, you know, we're working with them as needed.
That's a good answer.
That's true.
It's the answer.
It is,
so,
that is.
Yeah.
Right.
Thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome.
I have no more embarrassing questions.
No.
I think it gives everyone, and not to be redundant, but it just gives you the expectation of how you are supposed to behave.
Mhm.
And I think
Mhm.
in the absence of guidance, sometimes people, students and everyone takes advantage of what the opportunities are.
Mhm.
So if you have set rules or norms or whatever, then it just, not that everyone disobeys it. And you're right, I'm sure there's some children that are like, I don't need to know how to behave in the bathroom, but then there's others who are in there to avoid a class or consistently asking for passes to avoid classes or a teacher or whatever. So it just kind of makes sure everyone's on the same page
Mhm.
and treated equally.
Right, that
So.
consistent message. Mm-hmm.
Mrs. Washington?
I think this is fantastic. Because I was sitting here taking notes of things you're saying and things that came to my mind and things that board members said. We all need boundaries and we all need expectations. Students, we have 18,000 students who come from different homes, and they have rules and expectations in their homes. But those rules and expectations may not align to what our rules are in school. So when you're at home, you may be able to do this. But when you're in school, these are the expectations and the rules. And I've been in many schools, and they are posted everywhere. I was just in Green Holly Elementary School, and I'm gonna find it here on my phone. They have things posted, and it was so cute. It said, the 10 ways to get along with others. Simple things, very easy, smile a lot. They say, I promise, keep your word, don't gossip, be a good listener, learn how to compromise, respect others. Then it was another one, 10 ways to handle stress, confide in a friend, take a walk, listen to music you like. And another one was 10 ways to make smart choices, think before you act, remember your values and goals, make perfect practice, don't give in to peer pressure. 10 ways to make smart choices, think before you ask others you respect your advice. 10 ways to prevent violence. So these things are all over the school. Avoid places known for violence. Use words to settle arguments. Learn how to control your anger. Join a crime watch program. That was a good
That's in
one.
the elementary school.
Yeah, well, that was in elementary
Pretty
school. I
specific.
mean, they have safety patrols, so I
Right,
guess that
right.
could be part of it. But I applaud our schools, and I talk in the community about all that we're doing in our schools to promote safe, healthy, orderly learning environment. And students can't learn if they're in an environment without boundaries and rules, because it just can't happen if there's not set standards of behavior. I think what you're doing is great. I applaud that it's being done in all the schools, that you had training over the summer. You're going to evaluate the data. You're going to work with students. You have your tier 1, 2, and 3. If tier 1 doesn't work for you, you have tier 2, where you may work in a group situation with other students. Or group 3, well, you might have to do some individualized counseling or talking, or maybe it might even be referrals to outside agencies for students who need additional help. But effective learning cannot happen without order, expectations, and rules in the classroom. So I think this is fantastic. It just is great, and it's shown in all of our schools.
Great.
Yeah, thank you so
Thank you.
much.
I also think as students move up, they then have an expectation of, you know, what I saw in my elementary school, I'm gonna see the same kind of thing in middle and then in high school. And also with the transitional nature, we have students highly mobile, moving in and out of schools, to keep that consistent message going is also important. And then the fact that young adults don't develop that higher order good decision-making really until that area of the brain kind of settles in at about age 25. So I think we're actually probably somewhat lucky that we do as well as we do by virtue of that. So I think it never hurts to be reminded of things and to have that happen in a positive way.
Right.
I think that's one of the things that Mrs. Weaver and I really took away from that, the responsive classroom that Mrs. Wright talked about. Just really, everybody assumes the children know that they come to school knowing how to behave, how to line up, how to do all these different things. But instead, better to make sure that they demonstrate exactly what is expected and lay that foundation down early, so that the students really can then turn around and learn. So it was a very impressive discussion we had. The presentation was wonderful. So thank you for this. I appreciate it.
Thank you.
Can I say one more thing? And I thank you for including the students and faculty and staff and parents so that they can set the rules and boundaries. So you need buy-in in order for it to be effective.
Yeah, you're exactly right.
That's the beauty of a rule is made by somebody with authority, and expectation is built by a community. So we all get together as a community, and this is what we expect of one another, and that's the fundamental of this. We can all make rules.
Right. Yeah. Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
She was so worth the wait.
No.
She truly was.
So sorry. Tammy, I'm not gonna mess you up here. I'm just gonna close my eyes. Right.
Before she leaves.
Tammy's like, I'm gonna get in here really fast.
Good morning.
Good morning.
Report before you is for the month as of November 30th. It does reflect the budget adjustment approved by both Board of Education and the Board of County Commissioners of $5.3 million. So the total budget on this report is $215.6 million. Total revenues received year to date are $108.9 million, representing 50.52% of the budget.
I have a question on the revenue.
Yes.
Why is interest income, what's going on with that?
We have a fund balance and the interest rates have increased.
Gotcha. Okay. It's always pleasant.
Yes. So we'll be adjusting next year's budget accordingly.
Okay. I didn't know if it was a factor of the interest rate or the money that was
A
being held in the
combination.
account. Okay.
On the expenditure side, we have encumbrances outstanding of $131.4 million, year-to-date encumbrances and expenditures of $192.9 million, representing 89.48% of our budget. And there are no areas of concern at this time. Are there any questions?
I do on the, there's another document that I have that you have attached is the budget transfer summary. Can I ask about the, on the bottom of page 1, You have two different items that I have questions on, is on 11/20/2017, to relocate funds from other charges to conferences for a library media conference.
Yes. So that was for $400, and it was to allow our supervisor who oversees media specialists to attend an American Association of School Librarians conference, so that she could be exposed to the standards that are expected of the media specialists.
Okay, all right, thank you.
Did you have a second
No, I
question?
have no questions. Do you have anything else?
Oh, okay.
I was just gonna go back to the expenditure side.
Yes.
The group health program, I see that our available balance is 1.4. We've got 22.5 million encumbered plus expenses, but how comfortable are you with that 1.4 available balance?
Well, if you recall, we had a rebate, and the majority of the rebate was recognized last fiscal year based on the estimate that we received from CareFirst as of the end of August, and the remainder of the rebate was recognized in this fiscal year because we could only accrue based on the information we had in hand at that point.
Okay.
So at this point, I am very comfortable with the $1.4 million.
Okay, thank you.
Anything else? Okay,
Okay, thank you.
all right, thank you.
Thank you.
All right, does anyone have anything else? All right, then I will adjourn this meeting at 11:23. And then, if everyone's okay, since we had our break earlier, we can move right into the
I didn't even look at